Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of PhD-Politico discussions. I'm really honoured today to be joined by the former First Minister of Wales, Carwyn Jones. Hi Carwyn, how are you?
Hi Adam, I'm well. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I'm quite excited by the fact we're hopefully getting out of lockdown soon.
Well, fingers crossed.
Couple of days. So I want to start just by asking you, when did you first become interested in politics, and why did you decide to join the Labour Party?
Well, I became interested when I was about 16, 17, I suppose. Part of it was the subjects I was studying in school, but I just got an interest then. And what really sparked it was the miners' strike, which was going on when I was in the lower sixth and the start of the upper sixth. And I came from, though I didn't live in a mining town, a lot of my family were miners, and my parents are from a mining village, which still had a colliery at that point. And I just didn't like what the Conservative government was doing to the miners. And that radicalised me in that sense, I suppose.
Okay,
and I joined the Labour Party because it was closest to my way of thinking. So I say to young people sometimes, when you join a political party, you can't agree with absolutely everything it says. But you join a party that is closest to your view, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So I joined the Labour Party in. Well, I joined the party proper in '87, but I joined the Aberystwyth Labour Club when I arrived there as a first-year student in 1985.
Okay. So you were elected to the Welsh Senate in the very first election in 1999 to Bridgend. I'm just wondering, why did you? I mean, obviously at the time that was obviously quite an exciting thing. That was obviously it was a brand new political institution. What was it about that made you think I want to be a candidate? I want to be one of the first Welsh members of the Assembly, the Senate.
Well, I'd been elected as a councillor in 1995. I was the youngest councillor by a mile on Bridgend County Borough in those days. I was 28, which in those days was incredibly young. It's changed a bit since then, thankfully. I was the secretary of the Yes campaign in the two constituencies of Bridgend and Ogmore. So I was part of the Yes campaign in '97 in the referendum. And I wanted to be part of the first parliament that Wales had for, well, as we counted really, but 600 years, and to represent my home area as well, because I grew up in the town of Bridgend, left when I was 18, and it was great to be able to represent the area I'd come from.
Did you think, obviously it's 22 years later now, did you think when you were first elected, I'm gonna be here for 2 decades?
You don't think that far ahead. I was 32. I mean, someone said to me, you'll be there till you're 54. I mean, that would have been ancient in my way of thinking then. But what I never wanted to do was have a career in one place in politics. I see people in their 70s and 80s in Westminster. I think, well, someone else deserves a chance. And also, because I'll be standing down in this election in May. And also, when you've been First Minister or if you've been Prime Minister in Westminster, you're expected to leave either straight away or in the election after you've stood down. You don't stay, you hang around. Otherwise, you start to look like Ted Heath. You're brooding in the corner, pouting, because you don't trust your successor. So I'll be clearing off as a result at the election in May.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, you became First Minister in 2009 after Rhodri Morgan resigned from the position. And it's interesting looking at the. I was having a read of your time. Obviously, the first 2 years you were in coalition with Plaid Cymru, and then you had a 5-year spell. It was a Labour minority government, and for the last 2 years, it was sort of I guess you'd call it a sort of Lib Dem coalition, but it was really just with obviously one Liberal. I'm just wondering. I am curious. Obviously, just the experience of working in coalition with different parties and sometimes being in a minority government. How does that differ? How do those experiences differ?
Well, you have to remember it's the norm in Wales to work with other parties because nobody has ever won the majority. Never. Yeah. Now, I came in 2009. We had a coalition with Plaid Cymru with a comfortable majority at that point, but we only had 26 members as a party out of 60. After 2011, we had 30 members. That was enough to govern. It meant you had to talk to other parties at the time of the budget every year to get, because you needed 30+1 to get the budget through. And then in 2016, we lost one seat down to 29. I spoke very quickly to the one Liberal Democrat, Kirsty Williams. I thought she was an outstanding politician, and I wanted to bring her into the government, which I did as Education Minister, and she still is at the moment.
Yeah.
That gave us 30. And then David Ellis-Thomas, who'd been elected as a Plaid member, left Plaid, became an independent, and he then joined the government as well. So that gave us 31. So at the moment, the government has a working majority, which is rare in our system.
Do you think it's better to have that sort of system than because obviously, I mean, I mean, in a way, it would have maybe been in Labour's interest to have a first past the post system in Wales, because you probably would have won quite a lot of majority. You would have probably won majorities. Let's face it. Based on what, do you think it's so? Do you think it's actually better to have a system in which where parties are forced to work together?
Well, when you're part of the system, it's a nuisance. But if you look at it from outside, objectively, then you might say, well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing they have to work together. And actually, it's part of our political culture now. If we went to first past the post, we'd win all the time. I'm not sure that's good for democracy, he said generously. So in our system, we've got a mix. And that does mean you've got to work hard if you're going to get a majority. It is possible to do it. No one's ever managed it so far. But, we manage. We managed to have stable government while at the same time talking to other parties to get the budget through particularly. That's the difficult one. Legislation is not so difficult because quite often there's a fair bit of consensus. Or there's agreement within different parties about legislation. It's a question of some of the detail. The budget is the key before Christmas, getting support for that to get it through the Welsh Parliament so that we can actually run the health service and education service for the coming year.
Yeah, of course. I'm guessing it's quite a big political opportunity as well for opposition parties if they want to sort of stick it to your government, as it were.
Well, it's been pretty good, actually. I mean, people will set up their stall. You accept that you have to make concessions, and people sit down and they work through, what is possible in terms of getting another party to support the budget. It's give and take, and that's the way it should be. But nobody's been utterly unreasonable. There's always been, we've always come to an agreement in the end, which is what the people of Wales want. They don't want endless arguments, so that effectively there's a shutdown, which is what would happen if we didn't have a budget. And in fairness, parties. We've never done a deal with the Conservative Party. We tried, we talked, but it's just not possible. We're too far apart. So usually the agreements have come with other parties.
Okay, so I'm interested. So obviously you were First Minister for 9 years. I'm just wondering, when you look back at that, I guess what's your emotional, overall response? Like when you look back at your sort of time as First Minister, do you see it as a general positive experience, one that you're happy you did?
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe I did it for 9 years, to be honest. Now looking back at it, I think, how on earth did I last that long? But when you're in the job, you don't notice, the time, I suppose. At the end of it, you never have as much energy at the end as you do at the beginning. That's just human nature. It was long enough. 9 years was long enough for me, and it was time for someone else to take over, and I was happy to do it with that timetable. Would I do it now? No. Would I do it all over again if I had my time back? Yes, I would, because there were some really hard times, but there were some really good times, and it's really hard work. It's never ending, really hard slog, which is why you can't do it forever. But 9 years was enough. I'd started thinking, 10 years would be nice if I last that long. If I'd have done another year, I'd simply been doing it to mark time. And to get to an artificial target that wouldn't have been the interest, not of my party or my country, or for that matter, myself.
Yeah, I do have a great deal of respect for all politicians, people in public office, just because it looks from the outside studying politics, it looks like an absolute nightmare of a job. So I have massive respect.
You go into it with your eyes open. I do it all over again. It's you take a lot of flack, of course you do, but you accept that. You need a thick skin. There's no question about that. But you do it. Nobody forced me to do it. I wasn't dragooned. I didn't find myself being dragged away one night and thrust into the office of First Minister. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I do it all over again if I had my time back. But I wouldn't do it now.
Yeah.
I've done it now. Yeah.
Yeah, were there any particular sort of highlights, any sort of moments you really felt, I think when Nick Clegg talks about his time as Deputy Prime Minister, he always talks about gay marriage as being the big thing for him. Was there anything for you?
I think the most important thing we ever did was the Human Transplantation Act, which changed the consent regime for organ transplants. So instead of people opting in and having to carry a card, people in Wales opt out. Once you've lived in Wales for 3 years, you opt out, and if you're an adult, it's a soft opt-out system. If you've got a family who are very upset, dead against their relatives' organs it's a horrible term that's used, harvested, but that's the term that's used in the medical profession, then you obviously don't force the issue. You have to have some humanity behind this. But it was designed to ensure that those people just who never got round to opting in, but would have had no objection to their organs being used. So those organs are available. And those organs then are available not just in Wales but across the UK, because we're part of a common tissue register in the UK. It makes perfect sense. The larger the group of people you've got that you can match, then the better it is.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could ask for more than to be able to say there are literally people walking around alive today as a result of that legislation. You can't ask for more than that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Wales's constitutional position, but I want to talk about, as it were, when you were First Minister, in the sense that obviously while you were First Minister, obviously the big question was Scotland. Everyone was talking about Scotland in the UK media, and that was because of the rise of the SNP and obviously their great success getting into government and then majority government, having a referendum and so on. We didn't see that success with Plaid Cymru, and Labour in Wales was able to hold off Plaid Cymru, as it were, much better than Scottish Labour did to the SNP. Why was that? How were you able to sort of hold off that nationalist?
Well, the judgment that I made and the judgment that Rodri made before me was that the biggest group of people in the Welsh electorate were devolutionists. They wouldn't have called themselves that, but they were the people with their red shirts at the Principality Stadium, very Welsh, liked the idea of a Welsh political dimension, but not in favour of independence. We held on to those people. In Scotland, Scottish Labour seemed to have lost them. And those people then made the journey from strong devolutionists to supporters of independence and supporters of the SNP. So it was a quite deliberate positioning by Welsh Labour to be on the centre-left, but as it were, the patriotic centre-left.
Yeah.
The devolutionist, non-independence supporting centre-left. The dog agrees, as you can hear. And and people stuck with us as a result of that, which they didn't do in Scotland. And once you lose those people, it's a devil of a job to get them back.
How easy was that? Because obviously, I mean, there's a bit of a, I guess, I don't know. I guess in the central UK Labour Party, there's kind of this. I know Keir Starmer's trying to change it, but there's this sort of cultural stereotype of a sort of that Labour is an anti-nationalist movement. It's not particularly patriotic. There's that sort of stereotype. So how hard was that to sort of create a sort of Welsh patriotism within the Welsh Labour Party?
It doesn't have the same baggage as British patriotism has. Now, British patriotism at its best is a very positive thing.
Yeah.
But it also carries baggage associated with the far right in a way that isn't the case in Wales. You know, it's people don't feel threatened, or there aren't sections of the community that feel threatened by the Red Dragon. So it's a bit more complicated when it comes to British patriotism. That said, Tony Blair managed to harness it, and it can be a positive thing. People's pride in their identity can lead them to taking pride in having a fair society, for example. More equality, to people looking after each other. That's a positive patriotism. It's when it becomes fear of the other that patriotism becomes dangerous.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. So obviously, we have seen in the last, I guess, year, we have seen this sort of more discussions around Welsh independence. We've seen obviously the Yes Cymru movement has done particularly well. I know Twitter is never very good to judge national opinion, but they do like to very proud of their Twitter campaigns. And we've also seen we saw the ITV Comrades poll last week showed a record support for independence. Why do you think we have seen this sort of increased buzz around the idea of a Welsh independent Welsh nation?
Much of this has been driven by younger people. You tend to find that older people are furiously against independence as a group, as a rule. It's not the same for younger people. Some of it is driven by what Brexit is the fuel.
Yeah.
Because taking back control can be used by people in different ways. Brexit has destabilised the UK because the UK doesn't really know what it wants to be in terms of its constitution. You know, this is not the pre-1973 UK that joined the common market as it was then. That's part of the fuel. The handling of the COVID pandemic has also fueled it. The perception of things have gone better in Wales and better handled by Welsh government. And that is, in some people's minds, I've had it from people, I know a Labour voters not in favour of independence who are saying, well, we should be independent. We don't need that shower in London. And I quote directly what was sent to me. Now, my argument would be, well, actually, it's not about becoming independent. It's about electing a Labour government in London, but also about constitutional change within the UK. But there's no doubt it's fueled part of the independence movement, and also the Conservative Party itself is fueling it. This obsession with centralisation and thinking that you can combat sentiment towards independence by smothering people in Union Jacks, it doesn't work. those days are gone. We have to be far more constructive in the way we say to people, look, there are parts of this union that are worth keeping. So let's keep the best and reshape the stuff that doesn't work to have something that works for everybody.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think talking about sort of the Conservative, I think there's this weird hypocrisy with Brexit. I feel that they emphasise so much about localism and giving back.
Yeah.
And then you also see these people like the UKIPers and the abolishers, and even some people in the Conservative Party now talking about abolishing the Welsh Assembly. And I feel like that almost
it's a minority.
There's a hypocrisy in that logic, and I think
it's a minority viewpoint, but it shows that taking back control meant to take away control. We're talking about people here who are Westminsterists. People whose idea of Brexit was to centralise control in London and to suppress any idea of political identity for Wales, Scotland, or any kind of, say, for Northern Ireland. They don't understand Northern Ireland, and they're naive. So you'll get an element of it. But there are some people who'll be standing as Welsh Labour candidates who back independence. They're a minority. It's a strand of thinking, but it's certainly not Conservative Party policy to do away with devolution, because they know the mayhem that would unleash, not just in Wales but elsewhere in the UK, anymore than it's Labour Party policy to back independence.
Yeah. So I mean, talking about the future of the UK, this what I finally want to talk about is the constitutional arrangements of the UK. And you've spoken about this before. Like Mark Drakeford said, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? We talked about how the union was effectively, I think the term he used was it was at an end as we know it, and it had to change. What do you think? What has to happen to save the union in terms of constitutional arrangements?
Well, if the union doesn't change, it won't exist. I think that's the stark message. People won't. It'll just crack. The tensions that Brexit have put on the union will just simply crack. But it doesn't have to be that way. The problem is, at the moment, the Conservative Party is framing the debate in terms of either you back what we think the union should look like, or you're some kind of nationalist.
Yeah.
Well, that's a daft argument, a stupid argument, in fact, because that will drive people into the arms of supporting independence. That's where that leads.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the majority of the electorate, not the minority who are abolitionists. So to my mind, what I'd like to see is a voluntary union of 4 nations. It's complicated with Northern Ireland in terms of what can happen there. We have our own sovereignty, but we share that sovereignty. That's what Canada does. It's not that radical.
Yeah.
So you basically have a UK Parliament that deals with those issues that everybody agrees should be dealt with there. So, for example, defence. Devolution of defence makes no sense. Borders and immigration. The fiscal and monetary union, the ability of the UK to move money around to where it's most needed. That's a great strength of the union. It's a great strength of the European Union, actually, as well. And those things are worth keeping.
Yeah.
But it should be done on the basis of people working together and agreeing, what is done by the UK Parliament, rather than the current system of a UK Parliament which controls everything in constitutional theory and chucks powers out at the Celts to make them go away. That's not a particularly coherent strategy, nor does it take into account the effect that asymmetrical devolution has on the union as a whole. So it's no point tinkering with the car anymore. Things are falling off. Let's change the car now so we can all move forward in the same direction.
Is it? I guess the only, I do agree with a lot of what you're saying. I guess the only concern I have is that you'd effectively need the UK Parliament to vote to end its own absolute control. You're definitely not going to. I don't think you'll ever get that under a Conservative government. And I'm also slightly sceptical a Labour government would even vote to effectively end its sovereignty, its control.
Well, it doesn't have to, because parliamentary sovereignty may or may not exist in the first place. There's nothing written down that says a parliament is sovereign. It's all apart from the theory of one man, A.V. Dicey, in the 19th century, the Oxford law professor. There's nothing beyond that at all. And it's questionable as to whether parliamentary sovereignty actually exists at all in Scotland, for example. So the whole thing is a bit of a mess. Effectively, you'd have to have a written constitution if it was going to work, as effectively as it can. But the British Constitution can be summed up in 2 sentences. 1, there's a monarch whose powers are exercised through ministers of the Crown. 2, there's a parliament in Westminster that can do whatever it wants. That's not the basis of a sound. The lawmaking, the ultimate lawmaking body is itself lawless. I don't think that's a particularly sound basis for a sustainable constitution in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100%. I think
Yeah.
is part of the problem, I guess, from the Welsh perspective, is that I guess quite a lot of it is out of your control, right? I mean, in particular, I guess the problem of England, I think the question would be if you had a sort of more federal UK, would England be one state, or would you have sort of multiple states in England? And also, I guess the question of Scotland as well. I mean, I guess it would only work if you also had Scotland, right?
Without Scotland, the union doesn't work at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the United Kingdom of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland has a ring of stability about it, if I'm honest with you. For me, I think each of the 4 parliaments should have symmetrical powers. In other words, they're all the same powers.
Okay.
Otherwise, it just doesn't work. You have a federal or UK parliament that has specific powers that don't overlap with the powers of the national parliaments. Now, in England, English devolution will be a matter then for the English Parliament. There's nobody who's really arguing in England, well, the northeast of England wants a law-making, tax-varying parliament. It's not where the debate is, to my mind, in the northeast of England. Yes, that's what we have in Wales.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that the question of England can be sorted out in England, and done in a way that it might be asymmetrical, might meet the differing views of differing people around England.
So finally, I want to talk about the elections coming up in May. Obviously, you're not standing, you're standing down. I'm just wondering. Obviously, I'm assuming you will be voting Labour.
Yes. You heard it here first, but yes.
Yeah. So, what do you think? I guess what will be the sort of big issues? What do Labour need to campaign on in order to, well, maybe achieve a majority, but maybe that'd be unlikely, but definitely to win the election?
With every election, it gets more difficult to win. This will be 22 years now we've been in power. 2016 was hard slog. We don't have a Conservative government that's particularly popular. I think it'll be, there is a need to produce a manifesto that's full of bread and butter issues. It can't run. Scotland's election will be about the constitution. It won't be like that in Wales. You still need eye-catching policies that are affordable and deliverable in fields such as health and education and jobs. Of course you do. I think the election might be dominated to an extent by constitutional issues, to an extent, and I think will be dominated by COVID, and competence in dealing with COVID. In which case, I think the Welsh government has a strong case to make. Now, there'll be some who strongly disagree with what the Welsh government has done, but my what I'm hearing and what the polls tell us is the majority are actually happy with what the Welsh government has done. So I think part of it will be focusing on competence. Look, we are a government that's taken us through the biggest crisis we've faced for decades, and so you can trust us to having gone through the war, you can trust us to win the peace.
Yeah. Well, that didn't work very well for Churchill, but we'll see how it works for Labour.
No, 1945 was not an example that I'd use. But I think on this occasion it's because, but in 45. There'd been a calamitous 6 years, and people were keen for really radical change, and the Conservative government and Churchill didn't offer it to them.
Yeah,
didn't offer it to them.
That's
the reason why they lost.
That's a fascinating discussion. I did that for my history A level. I remember going through the Conservative and Labour Party manifestos from 1945. It was fascinating. All right, anyway, Carwyn Jones, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having you on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay. Ta-da.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this latest episode of PhD-Politico discussions. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to watch more content like this, then please do subscribe. Bye guys.